Hey, thanks everyone for joining us today. Welcome, good afternoon. We at Revera are constantly working to evolve and keep our offerings and our portfolios relevant and tuned to the market. So it's with a lot of pleasure today that we're able to introduce the latest addition to that suite of utility compute capabilities, which is the Revera Apollo service, which is very much focused to that kind of next generation built for cloud infrastructure and application hosting environments. So what we're going to do is we're just going to start out with a little bit of context setting. I just want to make sure people understand kind of where we are in the market, where we think this capability will be useful. Then we're going to hear a little bit more from Puneet from Microsoft, who's my new boss apparently. He's going to tell us a little bit about the Microsoft Cloud vision and how that fits in with the Apollo program and what we've been building. Then we're going to dive into the inner workings. We're going to do some demonstrations and show you it working. So that's pretty much the format that we're looking at doing this afternoon. So I just want to get it started with a little bit of the context setting here, so we kind of see where we're at, understand some of the influences on the New Zealand cloudscape at the moment, and why we think they're kind of relevant to the discussions we're having here today. I think one of the biggest themes or trends we've seen over the last number of years, and I'm sure many of you will be very familiar with this, has been the rapid adoption of cloud computing, but also the rapid rise of the big global public cloud capabilities. And very quickly those have gone from being more of an incubator type environment that maybe startups were using, right through to very rapidly being very mature capabilities that customers are looking to use for all sorts of line of business applications. One of the other significant events, obviously, in our part of the world, which has had a big influence on the New Zealand market space, has been the beginning of the arrival of those large kind of global hyperscale cloud capabilities, such as Microsoft Azure, into the Australian and New Zealand marketplace, which has obviously been, made them kind of a lot more relevant and approachable for a lot of New Zealand businesses, and they've certainly been looking at ways of how they can start making use of those, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. Concurrently with those kind of big happenings has been another huge theme which influences a lot of what we're talking around today, which is the consumerization of IT. And this is all about the fact that we've really got a whole new generation of people with totally different expectations on how things work. They're used to being able to go to an application store, click on something, it's installed literally in seconds. There's no complicated configuration. People's expectations now are, availability and new applications can be rolled out in seconds or minutes, not sort of months for millions of dollars like it was when many of us started out. Well, I should speak for myself, sorry, not age the rest of you, but many of us started out in the industry. So that's a significant influence. That affects us and the way the expectations our customers have of us, but it also affects, I think, probably most of you and the expectations your internal customers, you as service providers within your own organisations, your own customers have of how they interact with IT. And there's a lot more demand for self-service. People want to be able to do things themselves now rather than having kind of someone else do it for them. So that leads into one of the other themes here, which is around the kind of changing role of IT within organisations. And we see this very much being really important that the CIO role and the IT team is moving much more into being advisors of how to use cloud, advisors of how to use the various capabilities that are there, rather than actually being the kind of procurement, build, run team. And that's really where they're going to start adding the most value into the business and help the business navigate its way through the cloudscape that's out there now. And without that kind of that approach, that organisations do run the risk of kind of shadow IT springing up, because cloud very much democratises IT, and that is a risk that can occur otherwise. One of the other things that we're seeing too is that we've kind of gone through a few phases of cloud, and now we're at one where people are very much starting to ask, well, how do I measure the value? What's the value I'm seeing from this? Rather than just, I can do things faster, I can get them out there faster, but which was great, and that was obviously the kind of the first round of it, I guess. But now it's like, well, how do I optimize this? How do I actually scale back and make use of those pay-as-I-go capabilities to get the real value out of that? I think there's sometimes some quite possibly a little polarizing discussions around the onshore versus offshore. To me, I'm not sure that's really relevant. It's more looking at the right platform for each particular workload, and for some workloads, using that hyperscale capability maybe of an offshore cloud may be perfect, whereas other workloads that have specific requirements, using an onshore capability may be equally good. So I think that's also, and we'll talk a little bit about that as we go through. Finally, I think it's worth calling out, and this is one that sometimes gets lost in a lot of the hype in the media, but there are an awful lot of built for enterprise, engineered for enterprise applications still out there running that have had a lot of investment over a number of years within organizations, and they still need to have ways of running and integrating those and making those work alongside the new kind of next generation applications that people are looking to build. So it's very important to keep that in mind too. So I want to spend a little bit of time just making sure we understand kind of what we're talking about in terms of the technologies and the different types of the different formats of cloud capability. And primarily when we're talking around the Apollo capabilities, we're talking around two, which are the kind of next generation infrastructure as a service and the platform as a service capabilities. Now, I tend to find that platform as a service is probably of all of the infrastructure, platform and software as a service models, platform as a service is probably the least understood, or the one that most people have differing views on. So I just want to spend a little bit of time on that if we can. But we'll start with infrastructure and just recap on that. So infrastructure as a service has very much been Revera's pedigree for an extended period. And infrastructure as a service we don't see as going away anytime soon. These aren't conflicting or alternative capabilities. We see them as complementary capabilities for different workloads. So infrastructure as a service is great in that it enables you to take existing applications, which may have been around for a long time, the line of business applications that predate the concepts of scalable, burstable clouds, and run those in a more efficient way, often without them understanding they're being run in a more efficient way. But they enable you to get more leverage out of the investment you've already had in those applications, but start cloudifying them to an extent and enabling the scalable infrastructure, abstracting them away from the complexity of the underlying infrastructure, providing that ability to give some burst capability within those existing applications. So that's still a very relevant and useful capability. Contrasting that with platform as a service, though, platform as a service kind of moves up to a few more layers up so that you're really focusing on the application. And the primary difference, if there's kind of one thing you kind of remember that what's the difference between these, is typically in a platform as a service environment, the application is actually aware of the platform it's running. It was aware of the fact that it's on a scalable, elastic cloud platform, and it's able to start making use of some of those characteristics. Whereas typically a lot of the workloads we're running in an infrastructure as a service environment aren't aware of those capabilities. So you're providing that functionality to them to make them run more efficient. When we start moving into platform as a service, we're starting to enable those capabilities and functionality to the developers. So not only can we control them and scale things through the user interfaces, which we'll show you, but also we're exposing APIs or programming interfaces that developers can start using to make programmatic decisions based on their application, which they know way better than we do as a service provider because they wrote it, to make decisions on, do we need more infrastructure? Do we need to scale some nodes up or add some extra nodes to deal with a peak time? So that's one of the big differentiators in my mind, is the ability to kind of scale out or scale up. It's kind of important to note too that if you're looking at really where the business value is, applications provide the differentiation for businesses, and they're the things that are delivering features and functions to the business's customer, not the infrastructure and the servers and the plumbing. So it's kind of important to look at that. What I've got there on the right-hand side is that most of the business benefit or differentiation is happening in that top layer of the stack. So our argument is that's where you want to be focusing your efforts, and leave it to someone else like us or like Microsoft Azure to be focusing on that lower level of the stack and running that for you. There's an analogy that gets used a little bit in this space, which I'll mention. I don't know, has anyone heard of the pets versus cattle analogy before? So what we're talking about here essentially is infrastructure as a service is kind of more where you host your pet applications. So these are you know, with your pet, you kind of mollycoddle it, you give it a ridiculous amount of, you feed it gourmet food, if it gets sick, you know, you take it off to the vet and spend more on it than you would actually spend on a hospital visit for yourself. And you really look after it and protect it. And that's kind of what infrastructure as a service does for applications. Whereas conversely, if you're a farmer who's kind of much more practical with animals because they're your business rather than your hobby, you've got a whole herd of cattle. If one of them gets sick, then you don't waste time or risk that infecting the other ones. You just shoot it and you move on. And that's very much the philosophy that kind of platform as a service works on as well. So you scale out, and as you can see, I've got a couple of application nodes in that diagram. But you scale out multiple nodes, and you design for failure. So if one of those nodes fails, you don't muck around trying to fix it. You just kill it off and spawn a new one. And that's the kind of the difference. That's where you've got the infrastructure and the application interacting. You can start doing that sort of stuff. So that's hopefully cleared up. A picture of kind of what the difference between infrastructure and platform is. If you can't remember anything else, just remember pets and cattle, and that we shoot cattle, but we generally don't shoot pets. So having understood that there's a couple of different, formats that you can deploy, and it's also important to understand the other overlay when we're talking in the cloud space is geography. And I'm not going to call through, you'll be relieved to know each one of these points on here, but what we're getting at here is just that there are a number of different attributes to different geographies that you can deploy in. And we're not really saying any of these are right or wrong, just like I'm not saying infrastructure or platform is right or wrong. These are different capabilities that you need to assess for each particular application. I mean, personally, I have a bit of a favouring to the two on the right-hand side, but that's just me. Could have something to do with where I work. Where do I work again? It's Microsoft, isn't it? Yeah, what we're talking about here, I guess, is just considering the best place for each particular application. Certainly, there's quite a big overlap between the ability to use kind of some of the in-country cloud capabilities and the global public cloud, for example, but some of the extra benefits the global public cloud brings is obviously the proximity to where your customers might be, particularly if you're looking to be building, extending a New Zealand organisation right out to the world, then that extends your ability to have services delivered really close to where your customers are. Conversely, obviously, and it comes with hyperscale in that regard. Conversely, it comes potentially with some challenges around legislative or latency for accessing that data. So there may be certain legislative considerations you need to make there, which are appropriate for some data and some applications, but not for other. But also there's things to keep in mind with, if you're building new applications or next generation apps, they've got to be able to interact with what you have now as well. So how does that work in terms of latency? I think I'll probably move on unless there's any particular questions on that topic. So as I've kind of, the picture I've kind of painted hopefully is that there are a number of different capabilities and options to consider when you're thinking about the best place to be running a particular application workload, depending on what the application is, where it's at in that kind of cloud maturity state, who's accessing it, what the data is, what legislative requirements there may be around that data. So we see every application kind of needs to be assessed on this kind of balancing block. So you can see the kind of attributes that we've been talking about and where they fit in, And for each application, it's a case of assessing that and finding the right balancing point. And this is why hybrid cloud is key, because it enables the ability for organizations to be able to pick and choose, but do it in a way that doesn't lose control, that they're not creating silos. They're able to control that from one place and one environment, but choose the best of all those different attributes as they go through. So I just want to cover off quickly a little bit around, I've talked about the infrastructure and platform as a service, but I just wanted to make sure I'd actually hit on what we see as some of the business benefits when organizations are starting to engineer applications for the cloud and building applications for the cloud. It's not just because it's the latest diagram we've got and so we think it's awesome, but there are actually some reasons why people should be doing that. And very much the key one here is really agility. So it really frees you up from a lot of the complexities of the underlying infrastructure. It means that your developers aren't figuring out how to configure infrastructure and configure database servers and patch them and get them all up to speed. It means when you need to scale out because you've got a peak period, maybe during a holiday period if you're running some sort of customer-facing site or whatever, that you've got the ability to do that really easily without involving a lot of time. Now, it's not just sort of software as a service or startups that are starting to use these capabilities. We're seeing a lot of large enterprises really get into having this agile development methodology and agile development teams within their quite large enterprises that have been existing organizations for many years. And the reason they're doing that is because they're having to compete with startups and new organizations that are coming on the scene. And the only way they can do that is to start thinking and acting the same way to make sure they're iterating their customer-facing capabilities as fast as the new guys are. So this stuff isn't just relevant to startups, it's very much relevant to organizations. And the hybrid nature of it enables those organizations to be aligning those new engineered for cloud capabilities alongside some of their existing applications and databases. So just summing up the contextual part, and then we'll hear from some of my colleagues. We've obviously seen a rapid rise of adoption of cloud, and not only the adoption of it, but also the maturity of the use cases that we're using it for. There's still a bit of work to be done, and there still needs to be some great environments to host enterprise applications, those pets, and make those pets pampered and well looked after for a period of time. We think there's a good case for really IT taking some of these capabilities and using them as a way of really trying to make themselves spend more time with the business and use the tool sets and the capabilities that are there to run a lot of the kind of core infrastructure. And obviously, we see that it's going to be a multi-sourced cloud world for an extended period of time. And so we've been thinking a lot over the last several years about what that means for us and what ecosystems that we want to be part of. We very much like the vision and the view of that one seamless view of the cloud that Microsoft has. And before I steal any more of his thunder, I will pass over to Puneet.
Cool. Thanks, Keith. Hi, my name is Puneet Batra. I work for Microsoft. I'm based out of Auckland and part of the partner team. I've been working with Keith and Revera for the last 3 to 4 years. And they have been a very strong advocate for Microsoft as well, and one of our very close partners. So just building on what Keith has just talked about, what I wanted to do today was share a little bit around what is Microsoft's vision around this hybrid cloud. So, and that sets a context for Stephen as well, what he'll talk about the Apollo. So if we think about Microsoft's vision or Cloud OS is what we call the Microsoft vision of a consistent platform for infrastructure, application, and data that sits across customers' own data center, service provider data center, and public cloud. So it's providing that consistent platform. Okay. Now, what's unique about this? Everyone else is doing it too. Unique about this is providing it as a true hybrid cloud. So that means you decide when you want to consume public cloud or service provider cloud, or when you want the data to sit within or application to sit within your own premise. What that does is it lets IT decide what the business requirements are and then decide where to put the service rather than based on any technical limitations. Okay. Also, it lets you optimize the IT resources that you have, but then the scale, it's a limitless scale because you can decide, you can have the Revera's public cloud, private cloud, service provider cloud, you can put it on Azure as well, but the scale, as what Keith talked about, you can just ramp up as you require or ramp down when you require as well. If you look at, as we move forward, we know that the operating system itself is moving away from just being a PC or server-based. It's across every device. And Cloud OS becomes the backbone for that. And what we're trying to do is help IT deliver on 4 key pillars as part of that. First is transform the data center, and I'll talk in a little bit more detail about that. Second one is unlock insights. So this is business insights. How do you make sure you can leverage the relational data that you have in your organization with non-relational data on the web and use that for business insights and leverage the power of public cloud for that. Enterprise mobility, we know there are multiple devices in every organization. How do you manage them and provide some level of governance around it, but give the users the ability to use it? So with things like Windows Intune, we have enabled that as well. And that, again, is part of our Cloud OS strategy. Last is around application innovation. With .NET and with Windows 10 coming down the track as well, we are now providing the idea of the developers develop their code once and deploy to any device. Okay? So again, it's enabling that whole consistent platform messaging. So if we talk about transform the data center, what do I mean with that? Is if you look at all the organizations currently, what they have done over the last few years is, one, centralize the environment, virtualize it, and that's the way they have been able to show some cost efficiencies across the business. Okay. We believe the next step in transforming the data center is all about automation. Okay. It's about automating everything that you have and letting, and then you're more focused on the business or the service rather than the infrastructure. So it's about, in effect, managing a pool of resources that includes compute, network, storage, but it sits across multiple data centers, be it your own, be it the service provider, or public cloud Azure. So you're focused more on managing that service and what the business needs, and all the infrastructure stuff is just taken care of. When we talk about hybrid cloud also, you need to be able to consume this based on your requirements or based on the business, your needs. So it has to be available on demand. Okay? So your current data centers are finely tuned to what you need right now. So the cloud should be the same. It should not be any different to that. Okay? It has to reduce some complexity as well and cost, otherwise why would you do it? Okay? And the third piece, which is the most important, is it should be rapid. So that means you should be able to just say, I need 10 more servers for this thing, and they're immediately available to you. And that's, as Keith covered, as part of the platform as a service, you can just ramp up the requirements. The business just says, this is our peak time, we need more service. Okay. So that sort of gives you an overall idea as to where Microsoft is going with a Cloud OS strategy. So how do we execute against this? 2 years ago, we started this program called Cloud OS Network. And we started working with a selected number of service providers worldwide on building this or executing against this vision of Cloud OS. Revera was one of our partners that we have been working with over the last 2 years. Initially, when we started, there were only 16 partners worldwide. The whole idea behind COSN, or Cloud OS Network, stands for COSN, is that we jointly developed the technology. We use prescriptive architecture. So the Revera's platform is built on Microsoft prescriptive architecture. So that means they're not cutting any corners. There's a massive stamp of servers that goes in day one without even any workloads on them. because we need to make sure there's level of redundancy and that we have validated the design as well. Okay. We work with Revera also on the vision roadmap. Okay, what's coming down the track for the next 12 months, so that they can then come to you and say, like, these are the new services that Microsoft and Revera are adding to the platform. Okay. We partnered with Revera because they are already on the DIA panel for IaaS, and it made logical sense there as well. So that sort of gives you an idea of why we partnered with Revera. I'll now hand it over to Stephen, and he will take you through what is Apollo. Thank you.
Thank you, Puneet. So this is the exciting part of the show where we get to lift the covers off what Revera's been working on with Microsoft. As a technical person, Apollo is very exciting. It's a culmination of 10 years of what Revera is trying to be delivered to the market, with a culmination of a program over the last 2 years that's technically able to now deliver on that vision. As you saw from Keith's presentation earlier, we do take a lot of market input and thinking into how we develop products, and Apollo really is a culmination of all of that understanding. So with Apollo, let's be clear, it's a New Zealand hosted Azure compatible service. It lives in our data centers. We've got tier 3 data centers all over the country, partnership with Spark. And Apollo is able to look after existing servers and applications, as well as let you build the next generation of built for cloud applications. So it is catering for both workloads. The thing with Apollo and what we get from our clients all the time is we're being asked more and more by the business to deliver new digital channels, compete with the startups, keep relevant in our markets. Revera, please help us with that. And I think the exciting thing in working with Microsoft on this product is that we've done it in a way that's allowed them that global scale while still providing the New Zealand footprint. So this is the service catalog that we offer with Apollo. It is discreetly broken into two halves. So we do have the platform as a service capabilities in the service catalog, as well as some traditional IaaS capability. And the good thing about all of that is you can use our Cloud Creator product to get to all of that capability, as well as the Azure public cloud. But you get this consistent UI and programmable interface into all of those services. So my developers within my business that now want to write an application to any of these services can simply change the target, and they could be developing those same services on Azure's platform. And there's some real power in the development houses for this, as well as being able to use the same UI to provision virtual machines for my remaining infrastructure or pets. I personally quite like cows, so I want to be careful around there. But so it is a fully featured product for existing and new workloads. And what we're going to do today is we're going to take you through some demonstrations of the product capability in those two product sets. And then we'll follow that up by trying to tease out some use cases, so understand how you'll take your business and you'll transform or transition them onto this platform. And then we'll look to take some sample workloads from the audience, and we might look to size them up on the platform. So the really exciting part for me around Apollo is the platform as a services. I make no bones about that. It's important to manage existing workloads, but the real power for businesses developing new digital channels is in platform as a service. We talk about it as an intelligent fabric. When we deploy traditionally, we've deployed to an individual server OS, and that comes with some horrible ties in that the networking, the storage, the server itself, everything is tied to that one VM. And that operating system, you have to spend a lot of time building in things like load balancing. So now when you deploy an application to a fabric, that fabric intelligently deals with where those applications are executed across an entire server farm. You can even deploy existing applications to this fabric, which is really exciting. So you can take an existing web or database application, and you can simply deploy it to Apollo now, and all the benefits of the fabric will be afforded to that application. I can do some really smart things where my application understands where it's running, but I can even deploy it onto this fabric and get some of those benefits. So things like auto-scaling and load balancing, we can build into build into your applications today simply by deploying them onto Apollo with your existing tools. The platform services are all the same frameworks and code and languages you're used to today. So we're not asking you to write Microsoft specific. I'm sure you all use .NET, but for those who don't, this is not a one-way platform. This supports a wide variety of code bases and platforms. But we also provide some really nice things, so database as a service. So imagine now your business within seconds can deploy a highly available clustered SQL database instance. No server installation, no SQL installation. Simply ask Apollo for a database, and in seconds you will be given that database instance. Now that's very powerful, and you're also afforded the same fabric management of that database now that the remaining components are. The last point before I jump into a demo, just to call out in the platform services, is the scalable VM service. So this is where we're able to, again, deploy something that looks like a virtual machine, but that isn't a virtual machine. It is actually a role of Apollo. And so in that regard, although kind of traditionally you think you can deploy it in the same way as you would in another VM, it actually acts very differently because of this intelligent fabric. And so we'll explain in the second part of the demo how the two virtual machine roles are different. So Keith, should we jump in and take a look?
Absolutely. Great, so we're just going to have a quick look through some of the capabilities we've been talking about there. We're going to start just by quickly showing you Cloud Creator. So Cloud Creator, as we've mentioned, is our cloud aggregation platform, which enables our customers to kind of subscribe to a number of different cloud compute capabilities, be those in our own data center, our infrastructure, or Apollo services, or through to other capabilities and services we add in, such as Apollo and Microsoft Azure. Now, just quickly before I jump into Apollo itself, I'm just going to quickly show you the process. So imagine now we're kind of a company administrator. So one of the key tenets of all of this is that we, as the service provider, do not need to be involved in the process. We stand up the capabilities and the tool sets, and then we allow you to drive those if that's the way you want to work. So as a company admin, I would be able to come in here and provision my own users to subscribe them up to this service offering. Now, what that would involve would be going through and filling out all these forms. Now, there is nothing worse for you than watching me type all these fields out. So I'm going to assume you're all happy to believe the fact that I could go through and type these up and submit a user. But essentially, this is what's involved in doing it. One of them you'll notice is the ability to choose a two-factor authentication method. So we support the ability to have unique short-time codes sent to your cell phone as part of a secure two-factor authentication login to the portal environment, or use RSA tokens. So that's very much the process for subscribing and setting up a new person within your organization. So once they've been subscribed to the appropriate service plans, they'll obviously get a Apollo tile on their dashboard, and they're able to click on that, and that launches them into the Apollo Service Management Console. Now, for those of you who have used Microsoft Azure at all, you'll appreciate this is a very consistent user experience, and that was one of the things that we really liked about this capability and this one cloud vision. So again, if you have people that have already worked in those environments, there's not a lot of retraining needed. Not only, as Stephen was talking about, in the way that they're writing code, but even in the way that they're going in and interacting, configuring. Again, with the APIs as well, there's that consistency right through. So we're going to start off just having a look at some of the website capabilities. And one of the things we can do here, obviously, is create a new website, as you'd expect. And we have a number of different options, one of which is that we can, rather than just starting from a empty or default website, we are able to also make use of a rich gallery of websites and web applications as a starting point to build these type environments. So there's a selection there that we can use to deploy a new website. We also have the ability when we're creating, and I'm going to show you a little bit more of this later on, but when we're creating a new website to also be able to create an integrated database in at the same time. Now, I'll cover off that a little bit in more detail, but again, that removes a lot of the complexity around configuration tasks. It means that developers aren't spending a lot of time configuring infrastructure and configuring servers. They're able to focus on what they should be doing, which is deploying and managing websites. Now, at this point, sorry, I should have mentioned, when I was initially in Cloud Creator, that was kind of the system administrator setting up the developer and then subscribing them to the service. Now I'm kind of operating as if I'm a DevOps person within the organization when I'm in terms of the demonstrations I'm doing. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and create a new website, and the idea is to show you here is that we've literally gone from being, literally the developer's just been set up and been given their access to how quickly they can go through to having a website published and available to use, because that's what it's all about, the agility and speed. So you notice there I created a new website. When it first is created, I have the ability to look at a number of configuration settings, including its URL, how I get to it to publish it and to manage it for a number of different mechanisms, including things like FTP and other common technologies that people are able to or are well familiar with in this space. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to look at the scaling capabilities. So when it's first created, it's created as an introduction capability or offering, and that's kind of there for testing, doing a bit of pre-configuration on, to get any of the real benefits in terms of scalability, being able to use customer-specific domain names, being able to use things like secure SSL security. Then we need to upgrade to one of the two options that are available here, which is the shared capability, or if we think we're going to be extremely popular with our new website, we can also go to a reserved capacity capability model here.
And I think from a business, there's a really important point to make there is quite often with these new channels, you have no idea how successful they're going to be, but when they are successful, if the IT department and the new channel falls to its knees overnight, you're not going to be very popular. Generally, that would require an entire new procurement, the build of new servers, a whole lot of reconfiguration, hundreds of hours of sysadmins and tech guys. With the power of Apollo, we simply change the mode and we slide a scale, and the fabric then takes care of that new peak workload. And so we really can build this thing as a minimum viable product and a minimum cost as a business, knowing that we're not going down a cul-de-sac in terms of how we've architected this thing to scale based on demand.
So as my esteemed colleague has stolen my thunder there. It's fine. So as you can see there, we can scale that instance. Remember, we've just created this, but now we're able to scale it as we want. And go ahead, we'll decide we want 10 instances of this and click Save. And away it goes and does that. So there's now going to be 10 instances of that automatically configured and added to load balancing. Now that all seems kind of easy, and you think, well, so what? You scrolled across and clicked Save. But if you think about that in terms of, say, even infrastructure as a service, I don't even want to go back and think about it in terms of old school colo, but let's think about it in terms of infrastructure of the service. Setting that up would have involved someone provisioning another potentially 9 virtual machines, configuring the operating systems on those, patching them, installing the middleware and the other tool sets they needed like PHP or .NET, getting all that set up, then loading the application on, making sure they did it 9 times consistently, or using their source code repository to do that, and then finally adding it to load balancing. Now, all of that happened just by me dragging that scaler across and clicking Save. So that's you're hopefully starting to get a little bit of the idea when I was kind of prattling on earlier about the framework and the capabilities in the earlier slides, what that actually meant. So now we've scaled that out, we can go and look at some of the configuration options. So again, for the developers, they're able to have a lot of control over what versions of .NET and PHP that they want to configure and use for this particular application. a number of other different settings that they can go for and modify. But the next thing that kind of most people are going to want to do is obviously have a unique domain name related to this website that's relevant to their own organisation. So we'll go ahead and add one in. And so we're simply a case of typing that in and clicking save. And then again, we want to, we've decided that there's going to be some sensitive information or some forms on this website that we want our customers to fill in. So we want to be able to obviously have it as a secure site with SSL encryption. So we're able to manage that as well. Now, normally we would obviously upload a certificate. Uploading a certificate involves typing in a password. As we've previously determined, my ability to type while standing in front of a room of lots of people is not great, especially when it's a complicated password. So we have prepared a certificate earlier, but just to show you what it would look like, we would literally go and browse for the file and pick the file, and away we would go. Now, it's already been imported, so I'm not going to do it again. Having added that certificate in or uploaded the appropriate certificate, I can then choose which of the domain names I want to bind that to, which certificate I want to use, and go ahead and click save. So now, in a very short space of time from basically logging in for the first time, we've set up a new website. We've set up a public domain name to access that website, using our own company name rather than the service provider's name, and we've added SSL security to that site. So right now, if we were to go and look at that site, it's going to be probably super exciting. Really exciting site. We should also be able to hit that site on HTTPS and confirm that the certificate binding that I did worked correctly, and we can do that by having a look at the certificate there, which is in fact correct. So the next thing we want to do, I guess, is actually get some content up onto that site. So we're going to quickly go through it and do that. To do that, we go back to the dashboard screen. Now, the dashboard screen is also very useful when we actually have some workload happening on the site. The graphs here start livening up and showing you things. Now, obviously, at the moment, there's not a lot going on because we've just configured it. But one of the key things here is the ability amongst these various other controls that we have and things that we can view on this page is the ability to download a publish profile. And again, anyone that's worked with Microsoft Azure will know that this is a very consistent experience to working in that model. So we download that, and again, this means we don't need to actually understand all the configuration or how to publish that. All the information is in that publish file. So what we do is we go and find Web Matrix to publish an application. Now, at this point, a real developer, which I hasten to add I am definitely not, would be using Visual Studio. Visual Studio is, of course, the most common environment that developers work in. It's also quite complex, and as I've mentioned, I'm not a developer, so I'm going to use the children's edition of Visual Studio, which is known as Web Matrix, just to demonstrate how we publish a website up. But it works very much the same way with Visual Studio, except they're kind of way cooler. They need ponytails to drive it and ride to work on skateboards. So we start with an app gallery. I used to work at a software as a service house, so sorry, that's probably a joke that only I get. And we're going to pick maybe this blog here. Looks kind of interesting. Yep. Awesome, I accept. So again, what I'm showing here is that we're able to, we don't have to start from scratch. This is, the world's most common hosting environment. It's fully compatible with the web hosting roles on Microsoft Azure. So things that have already been developed by developers are able to be reused and published out to there. They don't need to be starting from scratch every time. Green ticks are always good. Okay, so now we have this website loaded in. We're going to go ahead and publish it out to our server. And as you can see here, we get the option of publishing it to Microsoft Azure, which hasn't been rebranded yet. I didn't write the software. Or to another location. So that, again, is demonstrating that full compatibility. We can take the same website that someone's developed and publish it to either place without having to make any changes. In our case, we're going to publish it to our own one. So we're going to choose the publish profile that we downloaded a moment earlier. And of course, we'll validate the connection. And that green box is a good thing. Click lots of messages that we're not really reading, because that's what we do as a developer. Sorry, are there any developers in the house? I should ask. Probably asked a little earlier. Yeah. And we definitely don't want anyone else's files there, so we're going to overwrite those. And away we go. So what's happening at this point now is it's publishing up a website to that new website that we created earlier. The point to what I'm trying to show you here is that very quickly you can be up and running, getting something deployed. There's not a lot of time configuring the underlying capabilities. I'm not having to install .NET frameworks and run service packs and restart and things. It's just literally get in there and start doing the bits that me as a DevOps wants to be able to do. So that's just going to take a few minutes to go ahead and publish there. While it's doing that, I'm just going to show you the database component of the database as a service component. You're unusually quiet today, mate. Are you all right?
No, I didn't want to steal your thunder
So
again.
It's not often.
I was going to add.
Here we go.
I was going to add. And it's important, these developers, these ponytail skateboarders that Keith refers to favourably, they won't generally use a GUI to get to the Apollo platform. They will do this in their code, and that's the beauty. Their code can create the same objects that we're doing today through the GUI, and that's extremely powerful for that repeatable deployment. If you think about a business, they generally have 4 reasons of deployment, 4 or 5 environments. Now, if every single time you have to go and develop one of these and click some buttons in a GUI, it's a lot more efficient than it was even in infrastructure as service days. But think of the power when, as part of the application deployment, they call the Apollo platform, which that fabric then takes care of the deployment for them. That's some of the benefit that we're really starting to tease out of what the Apollo platform could offer businesses.
So what we're doing here is just very much using the same user interface experience. We're going to go ahead and create a database. Now again, think about this. Normally this would have involved in kind of back in an AWS world, you need to provision up a new virtual machine, install a whole bunch of stuff on there, install SQL, get it configured, and then start thinking about your particular database. Here we're just able to use the cluster of SQL always on servers that are already available as part of the Apollo framework, and we're able to go ahead and create a database on those. I can't speak and type at the same time, in case you hadn't noticed. Not very good, not very well anyway, especially when I've got to think up a password that I have to remember later.
But this is a really good example. I mean, for all those people in the room who understand what it takes to get a SQL cluster up and running for your business, there's design time, there's sign-off time, there's architecture time, all of those things that go into it before somebody's even started building a SQL cluster. And now in seconds, we're about to deploy a highly available SQL database instance that supports a developer or any other business need. I mean, this is really where we're starting to show that the business does not extract value from this database in its raw form.
You just keep filling in the...
Oh, I don't want to be distracting you, that's the problem. Typing what I'm saying.
Okay, we can actually type the same password twice.
Thank goodness it's intuitive.
So as you can see, it's got very, very good sense checking in the user interface to make sure that idiots don't...
It's just about paint by colours, I think.
I was just so mesmerised by your spells, Steve. So as you can see, we've now created a database. If we go and look at that database, we're able to see, I don't know why I show this, but the one developer in the audience might be interested in it. So we're able to see the unique connection string to get to that database because it's obviously on a platform database server. And they're able to use that to then connect with their tools from one of the virtual machine roles to go in and manage that. Now, obviously, the database isn't much use if it lives in isolation, so what we're able to go through and do is link that in to our website that we curated. And I could have done this at the beginning just in one go as well, but kind of too much in one go to demonstrate. So we're going to link an existing resource, and it's going to be a SQL database, and we're going to pick from the database that we created just earlier, and now I have to type the password. Oh no. Just maybe
Should I talk this time or not? I'm not
Go and get a round of drinks maybe while we do this. And I click OK, and it adds it. So now you can see that website that we've just set up before. To recap, we've basically gone through. It's actually doing some work now that you're seeing on the dashboard. That's because we're deploying a website to it. We've gone through and we've configured some settings in there, like its unique domain name, like security. And we've also scaled it to 9 instances, plus we've linked a database into it. And we've done all that in, well, I don't know, about 10 minutes or so. A lot of that would have taken kind of hours or possibly even days in more traditional methods. Yes, we should probably actually go and check how our deployment's going. So publishing is complete. So in theory, if we go and hit our friend now, we should get a new website, and it will take a second to load. There we go. So essentially, this is the blog that I published. So that what was that kind of screen you saw before, saying you've created a new site, congratulations, has now become an application that I'm able to interact with and use. So all in the space of about 10 minutes. So that was, I think, pretty much what we wanted to show you in that phase.
And so if we look at what we did there, we chose a default template from the Microsoft Gallery, but that could have been your existing web application that you have in-house today or that you have in IWS, and Apollo enables you to deploy that exact same code base in minutes to that. So I think it's very important to understand that existing applications can be deployed onto this fabric and get those scale benefits which Keith demonstrated, but we really can start to do some powerful stuff as we move into the remaining roles that we'll be showing you. So next we're going to take a look at, I almost feel like I'm calling it the poor cousin these days, the stateful virtual machine. This little guy is the guy that you can virtually forklift any existing physical or hypervisor-based server today and drop it onto Apollo and get all the benefits of the UI provisioning and management and configuration out of it. And so it's really important that this role exists because we know within organizations that right now the majority of your workloads will need to have this form of service for them to work. But of course, you can start to build that hybrid out. You can start building some VMs in this service. You get those GUI capabilities of Apollo, but more importantly, you can start developing on the PaaS services. So it's important this can be your first step. Maybe you want to you've got half a dozen virtual machines. You simply want to extend your current network into Apollo, build a few VMs, see how things go, make sure the sky didn't fall. We're happy. Now we're running up and running on Apollo. But it's really important, as I said, that this one exists because without changing anything within your existing virtual servers today on any hypervisor or any physical server, we can start to select a service from within this category and use Apollo. I don't think we need too much. Let's jump in and take a look. What we're also going to do, and Keith will do if I don't interrupt him too much, is we'll take a look at the comparison between the scalable VM role and the stateful VM role, just so you get an understanding about how one is a platform as a service object and one is actually a traditional virtual machine, as you probably know today.
Thanks, Stephen. Right, so very much in the same way and very consistent user experience, we're able to go ahead and create virtual machines, both the standalone and the scalable role that Stephen's been talking about. We're also able to create virtual networks. So we're going to just start there because I'll show you, once we've created one, how we're able to use that as well to link into a virtual machine. So we'll create a virtual network called Auckland tests. Now the reason this capability is in there is that you could have multiple networks within the virtualized environment, and you can have your kind of different types of servers on different layers, and then choose which ones are actually natted through the virtual networking back out to the physical networking world. So there's a whole bunch of extra configuration that you can have and control behind the scenes there. Obviously able to choose your preferred IP addressing if you want that, given that it's encapsulated virtual network, it's kind of irrelevant really, because each customer's addresses can overlap if they need to, because they're all operating in their own virtualized bubble. But anyway, that's how easy it is to go ahead and create a virtual network. Anyone that's ever dealt with a network team, new network administrators in the house, I learn slowly, will appreciate that capability. Again, the whole point of this is DevOps type guys, they're used to that. You know, I'm got my tablet device and I can install an app without any mucking around. It just happens, and that's what they expect. They don't want to be having to stop and call service desks or change control or fill out forms. They just want to be able to go and do this stuff, and that's what we're trying to empower here. Now, it's not without controls. The controls exist with the company admin and with the rules that are set up, but within this siloed environment, they've got that capability and ability, and that's what they need. That's where agility comes from. Oh, sorry, am I doing your spiel now? There we go.
No, I was going to add on the networking. It's important that whenever we build a platform, that we don't ask you to re-IP your infrastructure to move to it. The second we ask you to do that, you might as well maintain it where it was, because the pain to re-IP, you might as well rebuild. So it's important that what Keith showed off there was the ability to essentially move your workloads into Apollo, and as far as they're concerned, when we extend out your cloud network, they wake up like they've been in a normal monthly patching cycle. So they wake up in the same network with the same firewalls and all the same things that they used to know about. They just now happen to live inside Apollo. And that's really powerful from being able to move small amounts of workloads in an iterative way to something like Apollo.
So as you can see here, again, when I'm creating a virtual machine, I've chosen a standalone one in this case, I can choose from a gallery of templates and capabilities, which again speeds up the process. I can jump partway through into a pre-configured environment for based on different configurations, rather than having to kind of start from scratch and install all those capabilities. I can also create, in fact, we'll go ahead just to create one, show you how quickly that works. But we won't wait for it to finish. I can choose the image that I'm using, the configuration, and the name of resource I want. And again, of course, I can change that afterwards. And the dreaded password field. Bear with me. Unfortunately, it enforces complex passwords, which is why I have so much fun. And as you can see, I can choose the network as well. So that one I created earlier is one of the ones that's available to choose from there, if I so choose. And simple as that, I've gone ahead and started the provisioning process for a virtual machine. If we go into the virtual machines view, we'll be able to see that that's starting to provision. We're not going to wait for that to finish, because obviously, as against provisioning a website, provisioning in a server takes a little bit longer. But we'll jump into one of the existing ones and have a look at that. Now you can see Stephen's talked about the standalone and the roles. So if I go in and look at a standalone, and again, it's kind of where we land existing engineered for enterprise type workloads, we can go in there, we can configure it, and we would be able to scale it up and down, but as we can see, that's grayed out at the moment. Now that's intentional, because remembering this is your engineered for enterprise workload that doesn't necessarily understand if you suddenly add 2 more instances of it, a whole lot more RAM to it on the fly, because it comes from that pre-virtualization, pre-platform as a service world. So to be able to change that around, you need to obviously shut it down first and then reconfigure it. Conversely, if we were to go and look at the one of the virtual machine roles here, we'll see that it's actually made up of a number of different instances performing that role. So there's 3 virtual machines performing that particular role at the moment, because this is one of our next generation scalable virtual machines. And if we were to go and click on the Scale tab, we're able to see we have 2 options. We can scale up, so we can increase the size of each one of those 3 instances by adding more resource within that existing instance, or we can scale out or down, for example. In this case, let's scale down to 2 instances and literally go ahead and do that. And that's going to obviously drop one of those instances out of the load balancing without affecting the other 2. Now, what's also going to happen there is that as soon as it shuts down that 3rd instance and drops it down to 2, we're going to stop billing you for that 3rd instance from that point immediately. So just worth keeping in mind. So everyone talks about scaling up in cloud, but when we start thinking about value, it's also about how do you scale back and how do you scale down. With the, one of the other things I think I was just going to quickly show here was the ability also to connect to the console of the machine. So we're able to, if we jump into the dashboard for a particular server, we can obviously see a little bit about what it's up to, which in this case isn't a lot. Oh, there we go, it has been doing some things. And see some of the resource allocated and its IP addresses, various things we need to know to be able to manage that. But we're also able to connect to it. And we can do that in two ways. We can connect through the remote desktop protocol, so that's kind of connecting in through IP, through the RDP protocol, or we can connect to the physical virtual console. So this is actually a thing. So servers have like a real console from days when they were real servers and they were in a rack and they had a monitor plugged into them. And you need to be able to get to that because when you're building the operating system, you might need to configure something prior to the networking being up and running, prior to the operating system being fully built, or you need to go in and diagnose problems sometimes. So we're able to connect into the actual console of the server. And this gateways through our gateways through a proxy environment. So it hits our gateway server and then proxies through to that particular server. And all going well, we will connect. And you can see it's kind of the actual console because it's got that kind of Control-Alt-Delete thing there. And if there'd been some error that had come up that was presented on the physical console of the server, you'd be able to see that there, or you'd be able to go and, if networking's not working because you do something silly like changing your default gateway, then you can go in and fix it that way. So again, we're trying to make as many ways to be able to go in and manage these things without having to place calls to service desks or raise change controls or whatever. So I think that was pretty much all I had to show you.
I was going to call out on the size of these virtual machines. This is another consistency piece that we're doing with Microsoft and the COSM program. We are looking to match those instance sizes with the same instance sizes you see on public Azure and keep that pricing Azure-esque as well. So it's very important that it's programmatically the same as Azure, the UI looks the same as Azure, and now the services we're describing and the pricing is very similar to Azure. And that's an important part of developers asking a platform for a service. It has to be able to ask for pretty much exactly the same thing, otherwise it won't work.
Cool. So back to you. The marketing team would like to speak to you afterwards about that abuse of the logo.
So that's infrastructure services, and I'll reiterate, this is really about enabling you to get some of the power of Apollo and start building out that hybrid cloud, but recognizing that a lot of your current workloads, the guys are probably still working on the plumbing underneath. So let's take some of that pain off you. The other thing about the console is the role of who does that provisioning can change. If this is a standard blog site or something of that nature, anyone in any business unit can be given access to Apollo, and because the GUI is so intuitive, they can start to provision those services and start to enable the IT organization to focus on much higher value things within the business. It's really important in the IaaS world, I guess, that there's the usual supplementary services that sort of round this out. You have to be able to protect these virtual machines that are your pets, right? They're the traditional back it up and restore it, and all those things how you're managing servers today. We need to provide that, so we include that with the platform. Of course, as well, additional storage on top of what we describe in terms of a standard prescriptive instance size. You're going to want some more storage because you have to match the current way those servers are deployed today. Some of the really exciting parts that is almost the technical glue of hybrid cloud, and one of those things is networking. It's all good to have a workload in Apollo, a workload on-premise, and a workload in Azure, but if you've then just got this big disjointed network, that becomes very painful to manage, and you can start to have a lot of security implications from changing one firewall. What we do with Apollo is we've termed it cloud area networking, and that just aligns to how we understand things today. So we've got a LAN, we've got a local area network, which is our on-premise network. We've got a wide area network that no doubt Spark, and a lot of people from Spark, so better say that, would be happy to provide you to connect into our data centers and cloud services. But now we're talking about networking between different cloud providers. So your on-site can become a private cloud. Revera delivers you Apollo, and Microsoft has Azure. By connecting via the internet or to any one of our nationwide points of presence, we can now build that routable cloud area network for you. We can provide dedicated, secure access to Azure through technologies like Direct Route. You no longer have to buy a service from an internet provider and connect to Azure. You can simply connect to a Revera point of presence or an Apollo internet termination point, and we will take care of the routing and give you some bandwidth to get there. And so this is just, again, this is this ease of adoption of hybrid cloud, and it's not just about two compatible platforms, sorry, it's about joining the two together, and networking is key. He's come over to kill a cow, I think.
Just going to point out that it's Express Route, mate. I think you can find Direct
Express
Route
Route.
Library, the book sellers.
Very good. I think I just joined the two together. So this is the point where we've given you some market context. We've given you format options, geography options. We've shown you the power of what Apollo does. And what I'd really like to do is take you through a couple of workload placement options. And this is what we're going to consider greenfields. You don't have anything today. You just want to build something new. And how you do that is based on some of these things. So, of course, we have formats. We have the geographies that Keith alluded to. We have the services we've just taken you through. Would anyone like to offer a workload, or I can describe one? Okay, so a number of our customers are developing new digital channels. It's simply a web presence for an existing service offering. And that web presence is your traditional, it's a web server, it's a database. Now what we have a choice is who are the consumers of that service, what are the security implications of that service, and that's going to start giving me some geography options. But really what I want to focus in is, if I was to put that on Apollo, what do I have to now think about? What's different? So what you could have done previously is you could go on and paid someone to architect it, you could have gone out and bought some hardware and all of those things. We removed that 10 years ago with IaaS. We gave you the ability to just call us up and say, can I please have these virtual machines? I'm going to build up IIS and SQL, and I'm going to build my new web application on that. And Revera would have turned that on in the matter of a couple of days. What we do with Apollo, though, is with our new PaaS first mentality, is we can simply turn on, as you saw, you can turn on, whether through a GUI or an API, the web and the database components. Your developers are deploying within minutes. The reality is probably the next day, because that's how long it took them to decide that they were going to log in and actually do the job. But we're not in your way. We've delivered you what you want. We've delivered you a platform. You simply deploy your code and you're up and running and you're testing. Not only that, you're doing it in the most cost-efficient way, because your developers don't need the scale that 100,000 users will bring to your platform. They only need one or two. Where we see some excitement in the three platform roles is, if I geek out a little bit, there's a notion of an end-tier application. So we have a web front end for an application. We have a database layer for an application, and there's a middleware. There's a business logic component. That's the power of the scalable VM role. That's when we've described how you choose the web and the DB roles, but that's when we start thinking. So for that business logic, that middleware layer, do I simply install again on a server? Now I can actually take advantage of a scalable VM. What that means is, across my entire new end-tier application, I can scale points up and down as I need to. I can build that thing as three essential instances of that at the price of 3 instances, and then I could have 300 the following week if that's what it required. And so by thinking about how you use Apollo means that you can introduce scalability at each point. And a lot of people in the room will understand that there is always a bottleneck, and it's going to be very powerful to be able to move a slider, and the business is going to stop standing behind your chair, no doubt. When we look at what we've done at Revera, we've spent 10 years transitioning businesses onto our services, not 10 years of people coming to us and saying, can I just build something new and I'm going to forget about everything else. The first thing that a business generally asks us to do is take away a whole lot of pain around plumbing and all of those things that they're having to manage today. Usually a storage array is about to blow up or is 7 years out of warranty. There's a new project coming and somebody just given them a $2 million, I'm going to refresh our entire compute farm type statement. And so the first thing we often get asked by a business is, as quickly as possible, please transition my workloads to a scalable infrastructure as a service platform. As soon as we've done that, the business can obviously breathe a sigh of relief. They don't need to spend any more additional funds on hardware. But more importantly, all of those people who would have had to be managing that have now focused on what the business really wants, which is some form of transformation program. And that's what we see with the long-term clients is they go from this, there's a fire burning and I need to put it out as fast as possible transition to, my guys are actually asking me how they can help the business and I'd really like to talk about transformation. So we just have a couple of scenarios where we explore what that really means. So if you have an enterprise right now, you could have 5 virtual machines, you could have 1,000 virtual machines. We can P2V, V2V, I like to call it virtually forklifting those servers, as I said, with their IP addresses onto the Apollo platform and that IaaS service. And I don't have to change anything. I have to extend the network using that new cloud area network. But ultimately, I can just bring my workloads. And all of a sudden, all my virtual machines or physical servers are now sitting on Apollo as a VM service. And that's a huge sigh of relief to a lot of businesses. We spend a lot of money on data centers, we spend a lot of money on hardware and those things, and a lot of very intelligent people so that you don't have to worry about doing that. But I guess that's where we're at now. So that's where we're saying, Apollo's there, Apollo's got this next generation IaaS layer, but please then let's look at how you probably want to spend your time, which is new application development for digital channels. But let's not forget, if you do have web and database workloads today, we can probably deploy that same code and database layer onto those PaaS services as well. So that kind of gives you a feel for how you start to use Apollo, that this isn't a, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to go re-architect my enterprise to use Apollo. No, you can use Apollo today. But what we want to do is we want you to use Apollo to take some pressure out of your IT organization and your business to enable us to start talking about transformation and new digital channels. So this is an opportunity for us to take you through a bit of the mission schedule. We keep that Apollo theme going. There's some big events that everyone would have seen in the industry pre-2015. Cloud Creator, that was, I hate to call it a pet project now, but Cloud Creator is a very fun project at Revera. It's something that we've spent a lot of time on, and it has enabled a lot of what you've seen around Apollo. But Apollo, that's what we're here to talk about today. Already we have select launch clients signed up on Apollo that are going through the process of looking to migrate onto Apollo. But we're announcing today a general availability date of the platform of July 2015. I don't want that date to be seen as, okay, cool, we'll talk then. That as you've seen, there's a lot of decisions and choices we have to make before we look at how we start to put your workloads onto Apollo. We should be having that conversation today. I'd offer some spots on the preview program and have a chat with us about that. But definitely, July is the date that you can aim for. But let's start the conversation around how you might use Apollo today. Even if we're talking about just extending your network and getting ready for that, that could be an important discussion. But I just want to hand over to Puneet to talk about another major announcement. Yeah.
So another thing that we are working on with Revera is realizing very well that Windows Server 2003 goes end of life in July. Okay. So we do have a lot of customers who are still on Server 2003. So there's a program in place from Microsoft called Custom Support Agreement, which allows customers to have ongoing support for Server 2003 as they have developed their plans for migrating. But the cost is huge. And there's minimum requirements as to how many servers it covers. So with Revera, we have come up with a program under the Apollo is that you can purchase or move your workloads to Apollo and then have custom support for Server 2003. So instead of having a massive sort of agreement with Microsoft, you can say, no, I need support for these many servers. They will be covered as well. So that's quite a unique offering for Revera.
So that means that those customers are able to move those servers in and still get critical patches and sort of support for issues that they may have on those.
Exactly. So, I mean, if you're aware with the XP as well, when XP support died, then after that there was really no support. There were custom support agreements. They were quite expensive. But this just gives us an opportunity to make it more palatable as well, but at least have it on a supported platform.
And don't get us wrong, we want very much to help all of the customers move off that platform and into re-engineered environments, but what we're thinking is that this is a great way of letting those customers have a little bit more time to figure out how they re-engineer those applications for that kind of next generation and next versions of those capabilities.
We're also going to, I guess in the standard cloud model we see today, we'll be deploying a second geography of Apollo. So that calls out that there'll be a single geography for Apollo, which will be in our Takanini data center, which is in Auckland, which you should all know. Thought I'd better call that out. But no, the second geography we will be deploying in our Trentham Wellington data center as well. Both of those are flagship Tier 3 facilities. And again, it's a foundational component that we're taking care of. You don't have to think about, is this being hosted in a good place? These are being hosted in the best data centers in the country. So that will be September 2015.
Stephen, just one thing. So the other thing that we are working with Revera also on is the roadmap. So Apollo is not just saying, here it is, start consuming it. We actually have a roadmap in place with Revera on 6 other services that will be coming on the platform over the next 6 to 12 months. The next one big one will be the Azure Site Recovery, which is our DR option, and business continuity. So we'll be able to discuss that shortly as well.
Yeah, and I think that's the overriding theme that we really want to emphasize with this slide, is that this is, we're moving very much in terms of the way we're running this as an infrastructure capability to the same way that the audiences of the DevOps work in terms of that agile iteration, constantly adding new features and capabilities as it progresses in kind of small but regular iterations. So we have a roadmap right through for the remainder of the year. Some of them we've called out there, some of them we're still working, as Puneet says, with the COSN program on. And then obviously culminating in the next big release and starting that process off again, the big release of Windows Server next year, which brings even more capabilities to share, which I'm not allowed to talk to you about right now, otherwise Puneet will hit me over the head. But they're awesome, and I look forward later in the year to being able to talk to you about those soon.